It's exactly 4 o'clock in Radio Cairo, and this is time for World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk with Nagla Nagib, and Dua Muhammad is at the control. Stay tuned to us.
Hello everybody and welcome, and we're starting right away with Word of Info, and today we're talking about an important topic. This has to do with anger management.
Well, people get angry,
Yes.
and sometimes the reactions is very harsh. And you are a psychologist.
Yes.
So there was a very famous movie that we have seen maybe 10 or 15 years ago,
Yes.
and it was about anger management.
Yes. So let's talk about anger and how to understand it, analyze it, dissect it, and manage it.
Right. Let's
Okay.
go on. Start.
Yes. Okay. So actually, anger is one very powerful, overwhelming emotion. It must be restricted and tamed at all costs. True or false?
I think this is true partially.
Okay. Why?
Because if you always put your anger down, then you one day or at one time or another you'll start exploding. This is one thing, and physically this is very hard on your heart and your health and your brain. If you always keep your anger tamed, then you will start having problems with your heart, or a rupture of a vessel in a brain, and this could be fatal. So, anger. Untamed anger is very bad, and extremely tamed anger is very dangerous for the health of the owner of this anger.
Not only that.
Yes.
Actually, there are benefits of anger. We cannot live without anger. This is a basic emotion, and it actually, as a benefit, it gives us a valuable signal of unmet needs. When you don't have a need that's not met, you start feeling angry. So you understand, for example, if you are in a situation where there's unfairness in some place, in that sense, you start to become angry. And this is a signal that you have a need and it's not fulfilled. So that's one thing. Another thing is it provides an energy for righting a wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it may trigger problem solving to resolve real threats or issues that impacts your life. Sometimes it provides energy to fight illness and do what's necessary. Other times, it permits survival when there's a flight and fight reaction to ward off danger. And finally, it can be used to fuel self-assertion. So that's the benefit. So we cannot get rid 100% of anger, and that's why we call it anger management. We just need to express it in a way that is acceptable and healthy and fulfilling. That is the whole objective of what we call anger management.
But the problem with anger is that you're actually boiling. I mean, you can feel your heart pounding, you can feel your voice rising, and you can always feel that there is hotness and flushes on your face.
Yes, and that's the cost of anger.
Yes.
Yes, and the cost can be discomfort. It's difficult to inhibit damaging, unfortunate actions. If you're coming out, your anger is off limits, you can lose more than win. And you compromise your health, as you just said. You carry risk of serious negative outcomes, and you promote negative self-image as a defect or as an angry person. So that's the cost of anger.
And of course, there is another point. Sometimes the reactions during anger are very, very harmful,
Yes.
and people can commit crimes under anger. They can commit a lot of bad things that they will regret it in the end.
When anger is out of hand, when anger gets very extreme, it becomes aggression. And we'll be talking about the phases of anger in a minute. But as for now, let's start by talking about what's the anatomy of anger.
Tell us
After the
about it.
break. So back again, and anger management. Okay, so before we get into the management, we have to understand the anatomy of an anger episode. Okay, so before we can tame the anger for a good purpose, I believe it's important to understand its anatomy and components of this most important emotion. The first one is the biological component, and anger involves this kind of arousal. We call it the fight and flight. And as your anger arises, I'm sure you notice a series of some physical changes. When you get into your anger episode at any time, we all do. What's the first thing you notice in your body?
Bad feelings.
No, not feelings. We'll get into feelings now. But I want to understand about your physiological changes.
Well, you are as if exactly you're fighting, so you'll have an episode of increased heart rate,
okay,
sweating,
yes,
flushes, sweat flushes, and
yes,
and your voice starts shrinking a bit with a lot of grudges on your voice, and you can feel that you are really tiring. You can even find some flow of not tears but watering of your eyes,
yes,
and you start over contracting your muscles as if you're preparing yourself for a physical fight.
Yes, so that's a fight and flight response. Very important for the body, but at the same time, if for a longer time, if it exists for a longer time, it's dangerous on your body. It's functional, it's important. However, what's the first sign you have is your alarm that you are getting into an anger episode. At this moment, you start to get into the other component of anger, which is the cognitive component. So what's the cognitive component? Cognitive refers to thinking. This kind of internal dialogue of your thoughts about the external world, others, situation you're in, and what's occurring inside you, thoughts about how angry you are or how loud your heart is pounding, and so on. So the way you think about life events and your unique perception is what determines how you end up feeling, whether it be anger, sad, or frightened. Okay? So comes this distortion relevant to this anger. There are certain kinds of thoughts that we call them the cognitive distortions. They are very central to whether you become angry and how angry you get. Okay? And so your core beliefs about yourself, about how others should act, and even about what the world should be like, set the stage for these thoughts and must also be addressed as you learn to manage your anger. So the cognitive distortions are the thoughts that the shoulds, the haves, the must, my family should be loving, my wife should be doing so and so, my children should be listening to me all the time, and so on. This is the cognitive distortions. The always thinking in terms of the shoulds, haves, and always.
So now we know that we really can control this feeling. We have to make it positive as much as possible, but sometimes there is an overshoot.
We'll talk about anger management, how to do this anger management in a later time. But for now, we have to analyze what is anger made of, so that we can actually know what to target exactly. Okay. So the third component is the behavioral component. It's what we do when we're angry that may get us into difficulty or help us solve our problems. So it's the behavioral part is an important part, because this is what is shown to others. The physiological and the cognitive are deep down inside us. Okay, nobody sees them. So somebody can be very angry biologically and very angry cognitively, but maybe they cannot get it out, or they don't behave in a certain way. They just leave or smile or do anything and just leave the scene, and they're still angry. We don't get it. We don't get that the other person is angry except when they do a certain behavior. So behavior is the third component of anger. And it's fair to say that we are judged by our actions and words, since others cannot see inside of us to know how we feel. And we do have different phases of anger that we are going to talk about. But before I talk about the different phases of anger that you see in the mirror, let's look at what makes us angry. What are the causes that makes us angry? In general, we have what we call the 5 S's of anger. The 5 S's had to do with sleep, stress, substance, sustenance. These are 4. I can't remember the 5th.
That's stressful.
That's very stressful.
This can make you angry.
And sickness. Yes, and sickness. Now I remember. So we generally have to sleep. Speaking about sleeping, the first of the 5 S's. Insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, waking up too early, or a poor quality of sleep can actually trigger anger in any situation. Okay, so usually we need to sleep between 6 to 8 hours at night. Some people skip night sleep and they start sleeping at 4 or 5 a.m. because they are out or anything, and then they sleep until 2 or 3 p.m. and noon, and then they wake up.
It's against the biological watch.
Exactly, and this is what we call a disturbed sleep. okay? Or a poor quality of sleep, okay? Because when you wake up, you don't feel like you really had a deep sleep.
Because your mind is awake and your body is asleep, and this is very harsh.
Yes, of course. The second one, which I consider to be a very important reason for anger, is stress. Okay, so the American Psychological Association, the APA, poll found that fully 1/3 of US citizens reported feeling extreme levels of stress, but actually the word is overused and not always shows what it means. So let's agree to use the word stressor for events outside of ourselves, like for example traffic, slow clerk in a shop, or anyone or others who don't act as we expect, like drivers, like people who work with us and so on, or within ourselves, like upsetting thoughts or worries about certain life issues or life problems that trigger the fight or flight response. In contrast, also the way our mind, emotions, and body react is what we will term stress. Okay, so we have two different components of stress: something outside in the environment and something inside, like our thoughts about different topics, our worries, our fears, and so on. This is another thing that causes us stress. And this is another reason or another component for anger. And actually, if you have, and there are levels of stress, and the higher the level of stress, the higher is the anger. All right. And the third is the sustenance. Sustenance means the food we eat. Eating fatty foods can actually cause you to have issues in digestion, health issues, and so on. Or not eating, malnourishment, like going into diets, like extreme diets of not eating at all, or just living in a nutritional intake of less than maybe 900 or something, that can actually cause you to become extremely agitated, irritable, and angry. Substance, like alcohol, substance abuse, a lot of caffeine, a lot of alcohol, and so on, can actually cause anger, can be a contributing factor in anger. And finally, of course, illness or sickness, and this reduces resilience and leaving us with little extra energy to cope or deal with any aggravating event or any aggravating situation. So these are what we call the 5 S's of that causes anger. Okay.
So now that we have discussed the 5 causes of anger, what should we go now? We know why we are angry. But what should we do?
Before you're very impatient. We have to understand.
I'm angry.
You're angry. So before we get into what should we do, we have to understand how do people express anger, because some people think they're not angry. This is not anger, and they get other people intimidated while in fact they're not. Like being impatient, for example.
Well, it's not impatient. I'm anxious to know, because this is important. I think all our listeners want to know, what should we do when we have an anger episode?
Okay, but what is how does anger take? What are the phases of anger? When you look in the mirror, how do you know that you're an angry person? What happens? What are the different forms of anger?
I always like what I see, so
that's good for you. Very good for you. Okay, so we'll talk about the anger and the phases of anger after the break. Okay. Info and anger management. So expressing anger and the face you see in the mirror. Actually, anger can be expressed in different ways, and the faces that anger wears falls into 2 categories. It's either passive or active, and it both can be equally damaging. So passive aggression, actually, when you don't come right out and tell someone that you're angry or act obviously angry, the other person is forced to guess what you're feeling and why you're acting this way. For example, if I'm angry with you and have not directed or communicated any of my thoughts, feelings, and needs, either I swallow my anger, or I get a stomach ache or headache, or choose to communicate it in a much less direct but nonetheless powerful way. So when you ask me to do something, I can agree, but just never get around to doing it. When we arrange a meeting or a movie or anything, you may find me arriving 30 minutes late and explaining that I just lost track of time. Or I may fail to tell you how nice you look when you've clearly gone to a lot of trouble to dress up for an event we're attending together. So that might be another way. So passive aggression may involve one or more of different components, like, for example, withholding something that the other person wants, even when you've been asked politely or the situation calls for you to act. Another thing can be avoiding any intimacy. A third can be stonewalling, which is very influential and effective, refusing either directly or by stalling to confront an issue that another family member maybe or a close friend wishes to discuss. Another thing is engaging in toxic behavior, even though the other person has told you that this behavior makes him or her uncomfortable and has asked you to stop. Failing to follow through on a request or a desired action, or being chronically late.
So, yes, what you're saying, you want
This
to
is
deliver
what
a
we call-
message,
Yes.
passive anger or what?
You are very angry at the person. You cannot shout or fight or do anything vocal or positive or active aggression. So what you do is you start acting in a different or a weird way. Stonewalling, not commenting, not answering, not fulfilling. All of this can actually be an expression of anger.
That's beginning to be interesting.
Okay. Which part exactly?
I've seen that before. All right. Okay.
Yeah, sarcasm. Sarcasm is, of course, telling a certain joke that only you are laughing at it. And have you ever made, for example, an unpleasant face, laughed out loud, or mimicked what someone else has said as a way of conveying your disapproval or displeasure, for example? Or probably all of us have tried out sarcasm as a way of communicating our feelings. Like sometimes we're not fully aware of how sarcasm makes others feel. Because I'm angry at you, I want you also to be angry. I want to, make you feel bad. So that I use sarcasm in that. And I cannot actually say, I'm angry at you. I just say, Ida, I was just joking. I was just making fun. And that's it. Sometimes sarcasm can actually be communicated without a word being spoken. Like, for example, just expressing a certain face or rolling my eyes or anything. Okay, so this is one thing. Another important phase of anger is what we call the cold anger. So when you think of anger, you may recall the last time you raised your voice, for example, said something unpleasant, found yourself in an argument, and lots of energy was expended. In contrast to that, we have what we call the cold anger, which is doing very little. Instead of discussing your thoughts, feelings, and needs so that differences can be surfaced, you actively avoid interacting, withdrawing your attention, and acknowledgement of the other person. And often the other person feels rejected and blocked from further interaction. Any comment?
No. Okay. Well, this is cold anger. I don't know the cold anger. I've seen it before, but I don't practice it. Oh.
Okay. Okay, sometimes in cold anger, you do not say it, you do not label it as angry. You just say, I'm just frustrated, I'm upset, I'm annoyed. Okay, this is one thing. Sometimes you avoid discussion consciously or perhaps without much conscious awareness, pushing the feeling very deep inside. Sometimes you change the level of intimacy within a relationship to reduce discussion, eye contact, touch, or even physical proximity. Refusing to talk and even possibly deny that there is a problem when confronted with your actions.
So it's the famous word that Egyptians say, Malik. So she would reply, nothing.
No. More,
This is
no,
not
no,
that?
that's not. This is Dala. No, anger is very. It's actually, when we talk about anger, and especially the cold anger, this is a very, very. It's as equal as violence because you ignore the person. Sometimes you can consider it to be for school for teenagers. If my friend is giving me this cold anger,
This is what they call the cold shoulder. Huh?
Sometimes it's sometimes it's like bullying. They are ignoring. You're left out. You're not included. So sometimes it's very, very influential in relationships, and especially in marital relationships. Okay, so that comes to the cold anger.
So when are we going to talk about the real anger that everybody knows about?
Again, it's not real or unreal. It's just terms, because cold anger actually is incredibly powerful to be overlooked and is sometimes destructive and literally makes a relationship so cold and sometimes would lead to a divorce. Even in that, sometimes if you withdraw conversations, you don't talk to the person, you do not give them any attention or interest or consideration. Imagine yourself living in such a cold environment. How would that impact you? I'd rather have someone shout and get out their anger than giving me the cold anger. This is deadly, and deadly for any relationship. I believe so. Then we come to what we call the other active face of anger, and that has to do with, of course, the hostility, and it's intense anger experienced and expressed outwardly without intent to hurt or harm others. So the intent of hostility is a forceful and intense venting, display, or expression of unresolved angry feelings through both words and actions, without taking any rational steps to resolve the situation that triggered the anger. So the actor may not directly intend to harm others, but just to express, like shouting, like breaking something, and so on. This is, I don't mean to harm the person, I'm just expressing my anger vocally. And this is what we call hostility. Okay, and we see it a lot when we are driving in the street.
Yes.
Yes, you see people, shouting and slamming doors and honking horns all the time. This is what we call the violence, hostility, I mean. Okay. Actually, there are certain characteristics of hostility. You have finding it difficult not to express your exacerbation, discomfort, displeasure when others or situations fail to meet your high expectations. Acting impatient is another way of showing hostility, like finding it difficult not to look to your watch or clock multiple times, or even if those around you are made uncomfortable by your impatience, becoming quite irritated and acting exacerbated when others fail to arrive on time, or when you're faced with traffic or traveling delays. You start hitting on your driving wheel, or start looking in your watch all the time and doing such a thing. This is hostility. Some characteristics of hostility. Sometimes engaging in behaviors like sighing, eye rolling, frowning, other expressions of exacerbation. Noticing that it's difficult to speak softly and contain your intense feelings of irritation. Your voice becomes louder, your gestures become more forceful. Then you can avoid aggravating situations as a way of coping because they seem overwhelming and impossible to endure, like leaving a store because the lines are too long. Like when you go to a store and find someone standing in the line, all of a sudden he throws everything in his hands and leaves the store. That's hostility, our expression of hostility. Finishing other sentences and feeling intensely impatient when their statement seems to drag on or they don't think fast enough. Please, yalla.
Waiting.
So exactly. So this is what we call hostility. Okay. Yes.
So what is the other face?
Okay, aggression. Okay, this is the ugly face. Okay, and it's the acting out of anger in an open, verbal, or physical way that's potentially hurtful or harmful to others. So if you behave aggressively, there is little doubt that you have already received feedback and possible negative consequences about what you said or did. So of all the faces of anger, being aggressive is the quickest way to get yourself into trouble with others and create serious problems in your life. And in contrast to hostility, aggression is directed at others. Okay, and with a goal of attaining an objective by intimidating, demeaning, or inflicting harm. Okay, so most people think of being aggressive in a physical term. Actually, certainly touching another person in anger, whether it be hitting, slapping, or holding, falls within most of our definition of being aggressive or indeed abusive. Actually, when we are talking about abusive relationships or abusive spouses, when the person just, you find the victim of the abuse saying, but it wasn't hurting me. This is a famous sentence, or it was a mild hit, or it was a mild push.
Slap, yeah.
This is aggression, and there are levels, but it is aggression. Once you touch the person in a way that intimidates this person, this means it's aggression.
So we're getting uglier.
Yes, very
as
ugly.
As we are passing through the
Exactly.
stages of anger and the different types of anger.
Yes.
So is there something else after that?
Yes, there's verbal abuse. Okay, aggression by words have been found to be a predictor of subsequent physical violence. People start verbal, and then they can escalate to physical abuse. Even if aggression with words, the damage inflicted by verbal threats, demeaning statements, name calling can be equal to and sometimes surpasses the immediate injury caused by physical acting out. Okay. And then we have negative labeling. See how
The different
how far,
scopes.
yes, how far is aggression, how far is anger. Again, negative labeling, characterizing another person using negative labels that demean or demonize. A problem with this name calling is that it treats the other as an object and not as a valuable human being whom you happen to disagree with. Objectifying the other person. Okay, like telling someone you're a moron or you're lazy. And of course we have a lot of, in Egyptian slang, we have a lot of words that actually reflect these negative labeling. Then we have contemptuous statements, criticizing or demeaning the qualities and characteristics of another person, which can hurt just as much as negative labels. In this case, you criticize the other person's appearance, intelligence, personality, or other personal characteristics without using a negative label. Like, for example, what's the matter with you? Or you never get it right. What is your mind? This is another. I knew I couldn't count on you. Why can't you try to look more attractive? And so on. All of these are sentences like implying incompetence, flaw in physical appearance, diminishing the other person's intelligence, or whatever. Okay? Then we have threats. And it's another form of verbal abuse, which is the other person that you will impose some kind of negative consequences. Okay, and this consequence could include hurting or harming the other person with your actions, like threatening physical violence or threatening to somehow humiliate or embarrass the other. Why is it important to know all these kinds? Because if you are exposed to aggression or if you are exposed to anger, some people cannot evaluate that the other person is having an anger issue. Okay, so it's important to understand how do people express their anger. And what is it that is acceptable and what is not acceptable? A lot of people would say, okay, if he didn't hit me, for example, one wife was actually saying that, oh, my husband doesn't hit me, but he just insults me, and that's okay. No, that's not okay. That's aggression. That's violence.
Of course. The verbal violence is very demeaning, and it's very traumatic, definitely.
Okay.
So we have talked about different types of anger, and this is usually, all of them are burning feelings that really gets control of your head. It gets you a lot of toxicity. The toxicity is not just inflicted on the people around you, but it is inflicted on yourself, on your well-being. When you're always feeling angry, then this is harsh.
And for that reason, you need to always evaluate how is anger a problem for you in your life.
And I think this is what we have seen, for example, in the movie of Robert De Niro, when he was talking. He was a mob boss, and he was feeling that he wants to control a bit his anger.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is killing people. The guy is doing
exactly,
everything.
and that's what I was going to say, that in order for you to evaluate anger, you have to evaluate it based on 3 criteria: frequency, duration, and intensity. So I mean, if I'm just yelling mildly and I'm not affecting anyone, it's not frequent, it doesn't take long, then this is not an issue in my life. But if it is actually very frequent, or if it's very intense, or it takes a very long time to be in an anger episode, then if it's impacting other people, causing me to lose jobs or to lose relationships, then it is actually impacting my life or endangering my life.
So we talked about different types,
Yes.
and we talked that all these have one thing in common, which is toxicity.
Yes.
Whether the toxication goes to your own self, or the people that you love, or the people that you're surrounding, or the people that you're working with. And I think after the break, we have to talk about
how to manage.
Yes.
And why to manage.
Anger management.
Yes. So back again, and managing your anger and resolving your conflicts. So at this point, we have learned that every anger response has biological, cognitive, and behavioral components, right?
Yes.
And you have had a chance to see how your own body and mind can react when anger is triggered and what phases of anger you display through your behavior. Now, based on this, we have to understand that there are certain strategies that you can count on when provocative situations arise that requires you do this. Be aware of your body, mind, and actions so that you can detect when anger arousal has begun. Like when I asked you, what's the first thing that comes to you when you're angry? You said heartbeats, or I feel red, or I feel my ears doing this. This is an alarm. This is something that is telling you, oh, I am now on my direction to an anger episode. So this is an alarming thing. This is biology is your first alarming. Yes, what?
But let me tell you something. You're saying that anger is a motivator sometimes, and it's pushing us to the right path. If I feel angry that I've been mismanaged by people,
Yes.
and I will express my anger, I can get my rights back. And
Yes.
perhaps this is how our brain sometimes fools us and
Yes.
tell us, it's good, let's be angry to get whatever we want from this person, or we get the best out of this situation by being angry, and I will give in for this anger feelings. Maybe I will gain more. And so you start in this vicious circle of getting angry to right a bad situation, and this is really harmful. So is there really something that you have said in the beginning of the episode, that there is something called good anger?
Yeah, not good anger. There's nothing called good. There's the benefits of anger is that it directs your attention to something that is wrong in your life, okay, or something that you need to be assertive in. But expressing this in an extreme way is the wrong thing. It's not right for you. It's the cost. You have to make a cost benefit analysis of how you are going to deal with this situation. For example, I need to fight with my partner, or fight with my colleagues at work, or fight with people in the streets? Let's say somebody did something in the street. Do I need to get out of the car and start punching this person? Now, yes, I am defending myself and I am having a right. But is it okay to just open the door and start punching the person just because he كسر عليه, or he did a wrong move that could have led me into an accident?
Or led you in an accident?
Yes, exactly. This is the thing. The thing is, yes, it is true that you are angry because of a situation. You cannot deprive yourself from anger. Is an instinct. It's an innate thing. It is what caused us to be protective about ourselves, and protective about our territory, and protective about our families, and so on. This is it. But the thing is how you can resolve your conflict, how you can manage your anger. We said we are not going to stop. We are not going to erase anger. Okay, but when I cannot deal or manage something if I don't know about it, if I'm not aware that it is existing. Okay, so how am I going to be aware of the existence of anger? By having the biological signals, okay, in my body. And now I know I'm angry. I'm in the situation where I'm angry now. Another thing is I need to know the level of my anger arousal, your ability to think and act calmly and rationally. And this, as my arousal escalates, this tends to decrease, to go down. And you need a way to measure or scale your anger so you know how and when you must stop your anger. And then you have to identify and challenge expectations. And this is very, very important. To challenge interpretations, self-instructions, and provocative mental images that fuel the anger arousal. And we'll talk about expectations for some time, because it's important to manage your expectations when you are managing your anger. So only by identifying these unhelpful thoughts and immediate rebutting and replacing them with objective and helpful thinking, you can turn up the scale of anger arousal, turning it off, not diminishing it, not erasing it as you think, and solving the problem.
So how to stop the anger, or how to tame the anger?
Okay, so an interesting method by Robert Ney was developed, and it's called the STOP method. Okay, so STOP stands for, it's STOP. STOP, S is for stop, for the word stop, which means identifying your anger triggers, determining your level of anger arousal using anger scaling, and interrupt and dampen the anger arousal. So this is stop. The second thing is think. The T is for think. Identify and learn to change your irrational beliefs that fuel anger and thinking. Identify cognitive distortions that fuel and guide your anger. This is the think part. Objectify is for the O, for the objectify, which means challenge and replace anger thinking so you feel differently. Quickly reframe your thoughts from seeing a threat to solving a manageable problem. And then finally, the P is to plan. Develop a plan to counter your upsetting self-talk, identify your thoughts, feelings, and needs, and effectively communicate them to others, avoid communication pitfalls, collaboratively reach a win-win solution that solves the problem.
Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible by training and practicing.
So, for example, when somebody comes to you, like Robert De Niro,
Okay.
came to the psychologist or to the shrink and asked him to try to manage his anger. Is this possible? And how much time do you need to make a person on the edge get this training to improve his quality of life?
Programs depending on the level of anger for each person. There are programs that can take 1 year, up to 1 year. There are programs that come to 6 months. It all depends. There's no one size fits all. Okay, in therapy there is no one size fits all, and so it all depends on how the person is, the level of anger, what triggers the anger, and so on. So this is important. First of all, I'll talk about the triggers of anger. What are the expectations? What are the problems of expectations? And this is one reason to craft your own, or to craft realistic expectations and plans. If I want to there are two ingredients to manage anger. First are realistic. We have to have realistic and attainable expectations. Okay, so let's look at some unrealistic expectations, and this is what I'm going to dwell on for some time, because this is what always triggers the anger, and this is what always moves the person towards
the dead end.
The dead end and the anger episode. First of all, we have unrealistic expectations related to expectations about yourself. Okay, for example, expectations about your physical endurance and performance. You can't physically carry out a task or sport as smoothly or as competent as you expect. Or you just can't do what you used to be able to do. This is an expectation. We have to understand that we have, for example, a student who hasn't been sleeping for a very long time. They don't sleep properly before an exam. What do they expect? Do they expect they're going to do well in an exam? Of course not. So this is physical abilities. Okay, or someone who, a last-minute person, he gets extremely stressed. In that sense, of course, this will lead to anger. So the expectations, unrealistic expectations, you have to put it. Or sometimes you have an. I personally do this. I do my schedule, and I keep on putting certain tasks, like 10 or 20 tasks in 3 hours, and of course this is unrealistic expectations for myself. Sometimes we have intellectual and task pursuits. For example, you don't meet high standards on tasks and don't receive the grade or result you expect. Okay, this is another thing.
So it's mainly you want to tell the person that you have to know what situation usually stimulates the maximum anger.
Okay.
So this situation is that you are going for.
We're not talking about situations now. We're talking first about yourself, because sometimes anger results is a consequence of your unrealistic expectations about yourself.
Or
for example, I teach, and students would come and take a bad grade, and they come ask me, why did we take this bad grade? Okay, what were you expecting? I was expecting an A. What did you do to take an A? To receive an A in an exam. I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did you do them? No, I didn't. Yes, I did. And so on. So you have to understand also your limitations, and you have to understand, in order to break these limitations or expand these limitations, what do you need to do? And you have to plan for that. This is one thing. The other thing is time and speed. Things are not done quickly enough. You don't arrive on time, or others are late. In that sense, you have unrealistic expectations. For example, a father who has a twin. They are, for example, 4 or 5 years old, and he is expecting that his wife is going to pack and do the luggage and clean the kids and dress them up and get them ready at 9 o'clock. This is unrealistic. So we need to give ourselves realistic goals for ourselves, so that this is some kind of lessening your episodes of anger,
So this is
or
number-
lessening the frequency of your anger. The second thing is success and failure. You set high goals that are not achieved as well as you expected. You are always trying to achieve more, and you are rarely satisfied. Okay, so this is about yourself. Now we come from, which is more important,
Is the external.
expectations from others.
Yes.
Now, okay, manners and social etiquette. Now, from your perspective, others act in a discourteous, ill-mannered, ungrateful, or disgusting fashion. Okay. Now, you expect everybody to be good, hardworking,
Angelic.
angelic. Actually, that's not the case. We cannot expect this all over the world to be that people are going to be, going with a knife and a fork.
Yes, take
in their
care of your
life.
wings
Yes,
because you're
exactly.
an angel, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Sometimes your expectation that people don't love you, or they don't nurture you, or pay attention to you in a way you expect by someone who matters. Your friends do not invite you for dinner, or a friend of yours is not fulfilling something you expected from him to do. Okay, you expect that your friend is going to mind read what's on your mind, and then he doesn't do what you're expecting. Then you get extremely angry and stimulated. Then equity and fairness. Sometimes others are unfair. Fail to acknowledge your contribution, receive an unjust reward, or fail to reciprocate a good deed you have done for them. Sometimes intrusion, annoyance. Others make noise, interrupt you, intrude on your thoughts or activity. Okay, like calling every 5 minutes, somebody calling you every 10 minutes too, while you are working or doing a task. This is going to trigger anger. Another thing is expectations for things in the world, like electronic devices, or your car breaks down, or you fail to deliver as promised, or how things should be organized in your place of work or home are not run right, or you feel something is not
The world is not kind.
Yes, the world is not kind. Activities should unfold, travel is delayed, or events do not COVID, or what we are going through, we suddenly found ourselves, all our expectations. I had a planner in 2020. I didn't write a single line in the 2020 planner because everything was upside down. Everything changed. So this can cause some anger, some stress, which is one of the S's that causes anger. Weather, environment, and so on. So this is how it is. So we need to practice to craft realistic expectations for ourselves, okay? Like you decide to save money, you decide to work hard to give yourself more time, and so on. So these are more how to deal with expectations, which I believe is one thing that you have to start with when you are dealing with your anger issues.
So we have talked about anger management and causes of anger. We went rapidly through anger management. We need to have another episode.
Yeah.
Because in the next episode, or the episode that we're going to designate to anger management, we have to talk more in details about how to deal with that, how to make ourselves accept ourselves, the others, and the situations around us, so that we don't get into an anger episode.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, right.
So this was World of Info.
Yes, with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University, Dua Muhammad at the controls, I'm Najla Nagib. That was anger management. Keep calm, keep relaxed, and
have
do
a good
some
weekend.
meditation
Yes.
in the weekend. Yes.